of the clavicle, so sternocleido, and then the insertion is the mastoid process. So very, very handy that the origin insertion is built into the name. To see this muscle, I'm going to turn her head roughly 45 degrees away from the side I want to work on and ask you just to lighten the weight of your head up off the table. A little bit more, yeah. And so that gets the SCM to pop up, and so I can see it. And so here's the sternal head right here, which is superficial and very sort of skinny. Can you come up just a little bit more with your head? Yeah. And then there's a little gap. And then the clavicular head is a deeper and a little bit flatter right here. So there's a little bit of a gap in between where I can feel the space between those two bellies. And then about right here is when they come together and they form a single belly that I can follow all the way up to the mastoid process. Okay. So I'm basically just asking her just to like hover ever so slightly off the table. I'm not asking her to hoist her head like really far off the table. It's not going to feel very comfortable for them to hold that position for very long. And it's easier for me just to kind of isolate one muscle by turning the head to about 45 degrees and then having them lift rather than doing it this way, because now I can't see what I'm doing. But if her head is turned and she lifts, I can see where my hands are and what I'm doing. So just from a practical perspective. Okay. So the actions of this muscle are going to be bilaterally to flex the head, unilaterally it's going to take the mastoid process closer to the sternum and clavicle. So it's going to do lateral flexion and opposite side rotation. For palpation purposes, you can do one of two things. One is just ask the client again to lift their head up. Lift your head up. And then you can kind of get your hands around the whole muscle belly. It's wider and thicker than you think it is. So typically what I see with entry-level massage therapists and massage students is that they pick up the skin and they think, woohoo, I've got the SCM. You really don't. Like, do you guys take high school chemistry? Remember the rubber tubes that connected the Bunsen burners to the gas? Like, that's what I think of when I'm trying to pick up SCM. Is it's like this rubbery tube, and I want to get my thumb and the side of my index finger around so that I can actually pick that up. So a good shortened position, because sometimes what you need in order to really pick up SCM is you need to get some slack in it, is to turn the head away and then give her a little lateral flexion. Go ahead and relax there. And then I can really kind of pick up the sides of that muscle, and I can either coin rub or even just picking it up and stretching it towards the ear can feel really nice. Picking it up, stretch towards the ear. Pick it up, stretch it towards the ear. Does that feel okay? I'm really kind of trying to get my hands around the sides of the SCM and then lift it away from the throat rather than pushing into the throat. That's not going to feel good. So I need to get my hands around it and then lift away so that I don't feel like I'm choking the person or they don't feel like they're being choked. That said, I have had clients who have been like, yeah, that's going to make me throw up. So for some people who have really sensitive gag reflexes, sometimes you just can't do direct SCM work. You have to find ways to do indirect work, like stretching it, which is another reason to stretch muscles, is you can affect them without touching them if the client can't tolerate hands-on. Underneath the SCM, when the head is in neutral position, underneath the SCM is the carotid arteries, which are the main arteries that take blood up to the brain, and there are baroreceptors, pressure receptors, in those arteries. And if you were to press straight down on the SCM, that's going to trigger those baroreceptors, and you're going to get probably some sort of like vasoconstriction, which can make the client feel kind of dizzy and lightheaded and feel kind of gross. And so one of the reasons why it's important to turn the head 45 degrees is it moves the baroreceptor out of your way. It moves it so it's no longer underneath SCM, so you can pick up and manipulate SCM without fear of working on that baroreceptor. It's the other reason why it's never a good idea to have the head in neutral position and go for both SCMs at the same time, because what could possibly go wrong here? I could push on both baroreceptors at the same time, and I could drastically reduce blood flow to the brain on both sides. So even if I happen to stimulate a baroreceptor on this side, I still have another carotid over here that's completely unaffected. I have seen people who go in here and they do SCM grabbing on both sides, and I'm like, no. Especially with elderly people, because they will build up plaque. People who have like arteriosclerosis or like, sort of the cardiovascular disease, stuff like that. So you don't want to dislodge plaques this close to the brain. So that said, the two big takeaways I want is that I want you to ask the client to like lift their head up from in a rotated position so you can really see the muscle, and I want you to be able to feel that you can get your fingers around it. Go ahead and relax your head. Maybe give a little lateral flexion so there's some slack. See if you can get your hands around the muscle and pick it up, and then stretch it towards the ear. Oftentimes there's a lot of like concern or fear around working on the anterior neck because it's like, oh my god, it's the anterior neck. And this is very, very helpful for clients, especially because a lot of us have that sort of head forward position. So these are often in a shortened position. Okay. Lengthened position. What do you think? How would I lengthen the SCM? I could laterally flex to the opposite side. I could also include some same side rotation. Now the mastoid process is quite a ways away from the sternum. I could also give a little bit of a push down to get the clavicle to move away from the mastoid process. So that's a nice stretch there. Lateral flex away. I could hang her head off the end of the table too. Yeah, that would stretch both of them at the same time.
Not really suggesting that.
Next quarter, we're going to actually do some myofascial work where we take clients' heads off the end of the table, but not today. Okay?
Take them off.
So, lateral flex away, rotate towards, and then maybe a little bit of depress the clavicle. Does that feel like a stretch kind of in your SCM there? Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead and we'll just do SCM by itself, and I want you to like really